This video would not have been possible without the support of heroic replicas. You might recognize the work from the coveted prizes at events like Games Done Quick and Desert Bus for Hope. These have in the past included the Tempered Master Sword, All Metal Hylian Shield or the Zora Electric Guitar. And Dave from Heroic Replicas, who greatly values our Zelda timeline videos, sent me a replica Master Sword, and I promised that if I like it, I would help promote his work, and more so, make a Master Sword timeline dedicated to the Blade of Evil's Bane. As a massive fan of the Zelda series and historic swords and sabers, I have to say that this is not only the finest Zelda collectible in my possession, but in fact the finest gaming object that I have ever seen. I absolutely adore it. A 100% one-to-one replica of the Master Sword. Yes, the in-game model introduced in Skyward Sword and continued in Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and naturally its sequel when we follow the canon timeline. You really don't get closer than this, and heading outside dressed in a champion tunic and with the Master Sword in a landscape similar to Hyrule's really makes you feel like Link. The quality of the build is unquestionable, with all details of the legendary blade replicated masterfully and exactly to what is found at the beginning and end of the Zelda timeline. Seriously, I can't put into words how grateful I am to Dave and Heroic Replicas. So I will say this, they need our help. To fund future masterworks and projects, Dave and Heroic Replicas are auctioning off 2 incredible Zelda replicas, and he wants you to take part in the auction. So Jason, why don't you introduce these objects?
The first is the Goddess Sword, the earliest incarnation of the Master Sword, which was created by Goddess Hylia herself. This divine replica has a high carbon blade, aluminum hilt and pommel, leather-wrapped grip, and the gem in the center is machined bronze with a cast resin jewel. The auction starts at $1, and you can take part in it by entering the link in the description. The other replica up for auction is a full-scale Fierce Deity Sword from Majora's Mask. Yes, the blade that utterly destroyed Majora inside the Moon of Termina. 60 inches overall and constructed from over 15 pounds of solid aluminum. This replica is nothing short of high Zelda art. Anodized in light green, teal, and dark green, it matches its appearances in Majora's Mask 3D and Hyrule Warriors perfectly, as well as the original comic-style concept art from Majora's Mask and the Nintendo 64. So check the listing for more details.
Even if you miss out on the auctions, you can still visit the site at heroicreplicas.com and drop him a line. Dave is accepting new commissions for 2021 and beyond, and if you're quick, he will make something truly special for you in the big Zelda 35th anniversary next year. Now, let's get the introduction started.
In the era of creation, upon descending down from the heavens, Din, the goddess of power, created the red earth. Nehru, the goddess of wisdom, gave its spirit of law. And Faror, the goddess of courage, created life and the life forms that would uphold the law of the world. With their labor complete, the 3 golden goddesses departed back for the heavens, but left behind a relic, the Triforce, in the care of Goddess Hylia. She protected the relic without greater issues, but then the Demon King Demise, with his army of monsters, invaded and forced Hylia to initiate her true plan to protect the complete Triforce. Unbeknownst to Demise, her grace had created a divine blade for her future chosen hero. Through him, the Triforce would be protected from evil in future ages. There was only one issue at the time of the invasion. The hero was still not around. So together with the surviving humans, the Triforce, which Hylia, due to being a goddess, couldn't utilize to protect the people of the surface, the Goddess Sword was sent up into the skies. The divine blade was enshrined inside the goddess statue, while the split Triforce was hidden underneath in the maze of Sky Keep. Back on the surface, Hylia managed, with the other races, to contain and seal Demise. But since this seal could not last forever, she created an intelligent humanoid spirit, Phi, which would serve her future master. At the same time, Hylia realized that with the Triforce up in the sky, her only task from the Golden Goddesses to keep the Triforce safe was futile on the surface. In particular, since she, as the goddess, couldn't wield the Triforce herself.
this divine limitation was decisive for her grace to give up her immortality and to be reincarnated as a mortal who could take advantage of the Triforce. Hylia passed away, and for many years the Triforce and the Goddess Sword rested hidden up in the sky. Thousands of years passed, and as the seal of the Demon King began to weaken, Hylia was finally reincarnated as Zelda and grew close to a student at the Knight Academy, headed by her father, Gaepora. During the wing ceremony, Link passed the trials, received a divine sail club from Zelda, and got some alone time with her until Demon Lord Girahim sent a mortal incarnation of the goddess flying down to the surface. Distraught, Link, as the now chosen hero of the reincarnated Hylia, or specifically Zelda, was guided by the spirit within the goddess sword, Fi, to the statue of the goddess and the chamber of the sword. There, Link pulled the divine blade from its pedestal and became, as Fi put it, "The youth who draws forth the guiding sword shall be known as the goddess' chosen hero, and it is he who possesses an unbreakable spirit." Upon being granted the Green Knight uniform of the year, Link made his way down to the surface and utilized the dowsing and Skyward strike abilities within the goddess sword to locate Zelda, and then after she traveled through the Gate of Time to the past, set out on a mission to seek out the 3 sacred flames to purify and temper the sword into the evil-destroying weapon that transcends time and space.
The flame of Furore forged the goddess sword into the goddess longsword after extending its length and doubling its strength. Nehru's flame then transformed the goddess longsword into the goddess white sword, and Din's flame finally tempered the goddess longsword with the sacred light, the divine power to repel evil, and the sword transformed into the Master Sword. Even so, the final form of the goddess sword, and thus the Master Sword, was first reached after Link passed through the Gate of Time to the past, where Zelda blessed the blade and turned it into the true Master Sword with its characteristic blue light force. This power became crucial after Link brought the Triforce down to the surface to crush the imprisoned Demise, and was then after Zelda was once again kidnapped, embroiled in a final battle against Girahim, who turned out to be none other than the spirit of the resurrected Demise's sword. 2 blades of light and dark facing each other to decide the future of the world. Link stood victorious when the Master Sword pierced Demise's chest and dissolved his sword, but as peace appeared to be achieved and the Master Sword's purpose fulfilled, Demise struck back in his last words, "Though this is not the end, my hate never perishes. It is born anew in a cycle with no end. I will rise again. Those like you, those who share the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero, they are eternally bound to this curse. An incarnation of my hatred shall ever follow your kind, dooming them to wander a blood-soaked sea of darkness for all time." Demise had to be sealed in the Master Sword, where his decaying remains would be kept in check by Fi.
Destroying evil was the original purpose of the Master Sword, which was laid to rest in the pedestal in the Sealed Temple, the former Temple of Hylia. But after interlopers briefly managed to force their control over the Triforce, it became clear to the ancient sage Rauru that the sword could serve a different purpose, as the perfect lock to keep the complete Triforce safe in the sacred realm. After all, only the spirit of the hero, as identified by Fi, could pull the blade when the incarnation of Demise's hatred would finally rise. Until that day arrived, the Kingdom of Hyrule was founded by Zelda of the Sky's descendants, and a different threat, Vati, had been sealed in the Force Sword 3 times. The kingdom had even prevailed for a bloody civil war. With the end of this conflict and subsequent unification, the vengeful Gerudo King Ganondorf and a new Link and Zelda would once again assemble around the Master Sword. As it turned out, Ganondorf was Demise's reincarnated hatred and manipulated through his actions Link and Zelda to open the Door of Time, and then Link as the spirit of the hero to pull the Master Sword. He then took advantage of Link being sealed for the next 7 years after pulling the blade as a child, and then the Gerudo King went on to attempt to claim the complete Triforce in the Temple of Light, but to his great disappointment ended up only with the Triforce of Power. After the Triforce split, the Divine Seal backfired, and with it the Kingdom of Hyrule fell, and Ganondorf, as the self-proclaimed King of Evil, ruled for 7 long years with an iron fist through the Triforce of Power. This in turn would change the requirements for pulling the sword in 2 out of the 3 timelines.
The Master Sword in the era of the Hero of Time was special despite not being upgradable due to its time-traveling ability when pulled or returned to the pedestal of time. With it, Link was able to travel back and forth in time and make his way up to the top of Ganon's castle to challenge the King of Evil and free Zelda from his clutches. Ganondorf fell in one of 2 outcomes, but by utilizing the Triforce of Power with his last strength, he managed to transform into the Demon King Ganon, who promptly knocked the Master Sword beyond the barrier he had created, forcing Link to break the barrier so that he, with the sword's divine glow, could finish the fight and end Ganondorf's and Ganon's brutal reign over Hyrule. Ganondorf was sealed in the Sacred Realm, but with adult Princess Zelda of the era of the Hero of Time's decision to send away the spirit of the hero so that he could relive his childhood, she doomed her descendants. Thus, the Master Sword remained unpulled after it was returned to the pedestal by Princess Zelda in the adult timeline. Even after Ganondorf broke free from his seal, and the Zora Sage Laruto and the Kokiri Sage Fado made their way to the Earth and Wind Temple to offer their prayers to power up the sword, Fi didn't locate her next master, which forced the king to use the Triforce of Wisdom and Courage to seal the kingdom, himself and Ganondorf, under a great sea. The era simply had no individual with the spirit of the hero, and with it the Master Sword remained in its pedestal in the era of no hero. Even so, the Blade of Evil's Bane still played a crucial role as it sealed away Ganondorf's magic, or more precisely, also froze the span of time underneath the Great Sea. As Ganondorf put it, "You see, it is also a sort of key, a most wretched little key that has kept the seal on me and my magic intact. By withdrawing the blade, you have broken that seal."
That is exactly what happened when Link of the Era of the Great Sea pulled the Master Sword in Hyrule Castle and stormed the Forsaken Fortress, unaware of the blade's weakened state after the 2 original sages, which were upholding its true form, had been killed by Ganondorf. A deliberate move from the King of Evil to replay the Blade of Evil's Bane power to repel evil. Thus, 2 new sages, Medley and Makar, were required to restore the full power to the blade. Medley, playing and praying together with the spirit of Laruto, brought the guard back to its true position, while Makar and the spirit of Fado restored the glow of the gem and the Triforce mark. The Master Sword was ready to take on Ganondorf, and after Link restored the fragmented Triforce of Courage, he was deemed the hero of Winds, and challenged the former Gerudo King to a decisive confrontation, a final battle that would end with the fully powered Master Sword planted in Ganondorf's forehead, and through it turn the King of Evil into stone. With King Daphne's last wish to wash away the deserted kingdom of Hyrule, and with it the Master Sword and Ganondorf, the Blade of Evil's Bane was never seen again in the adult timeline bridge. And this is an appropriate time to break the 4th wall and go over a few other blades that might resemble the Master Sword, but which aren't the Blade of Evil's Bane. In the adult timeline we have the Phantom Sword, which destroyed Bellum in Phantom Hourglass, and the Locomo Sword, which crushed Maladus in Spirit Tracks. But as these names suggest, these are not swords aimed at protecting Hyrule, the Triforce, or destroying or sealing Demise's reincarnated hatred. The same goes in the Child timeline, where the Master Sword was never pulled by the Hero of Time, and he instead brought his Kokiri sword to Termina and gradually gained new blades, and finally the ultimate blade of Termina, the Fierce Deity's Sword, which utterly destroyed Majora. Since the Hero of Time, and thus the spirit of the hero, had returned with the Triforce of Courage from the adult timeline, the Master Sword was deliberately not pulled to prevent Ganondorf from entering the Sacred Realm once again. Link, knowing that he wouldn't be the hero of Hyrule and looking for where Navi had departed, ended up in Termina, and no other individual was able to pull the blade when Ganondorf and his Gerudo army invaded. The Kingdom of Hyrule had to repel back the enemy the traditional way in a long-fought war, which left Hyrule Castle, Castle Town, and this time even the Temple of Time in ruin. Eventually, after Ganondorf's capture, botched execution, awakening as the wielder of the Triforce of Power, and finally banishment to the Twilight Realm, a new castle and town were built elsewhere, while the Master Sword rested in its pedestal as nature took back the former squares and streets of the first castle town.
It was first during the Twilight Invasion, when the banished King of Evil managed to break his malice out of the Twilight Realm, that an other Link, a bloodline descendant of the Hero of Time, with the spirit of the hero, would pull the Master Sword. Though not in the state Fi was used to face its masters, as such the blade's divine light turned Wolf Link back into the Hero of Twilight. He in turn pulled the blade from the pedestal, and with the sword traveled back to the past to claim the Dominion Rod, which became crucial to clear a path to the Twilight Realm, where the Master Sword fused with the power of the souls. A sign that the gods of the Twilight Realm supported Link in his quest against Zant. It is just that the power of the souls was exclusive to the Twilight Realm. Though that didn't matter, as Ganondorf was waiting for his first appointment with the blade's sharp edges in the Child Timeline. The 4-stage battle required the use of the Master Sword, but it was first the final duel where Ganondorf wielded the Sage's Sword that was used in his botched execution that the Master Sword was used to inflict the ending blow by Link, the Hero of Twilight. The Master Sword pierced Ganondorf's chest and remained there until his standing death. The sword was pulled out by Link and then returned to the ruins of the overgrown Temple of Time, and there it slept throughout the rest of the Child Timeline. Sure, there could be something further down the line, and we will get back to it. But first, let's go through the Master Sword's unique journey through the 2 games it appears in the Downfall timeline.
Yes, a Master Sword is found in the Oracle games when going through a connected playthrough, and though it is similar, it isn't the Blade of Evil's Bane. Hyrule Encyclopedia, page 83, confirms that with the following quote: "In Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, connecting Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages upgrades the Noble Sword, giving it power akin to the Master Sword." With that out of the way, let's focus on the Master Sword in A Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds in the Downfall timeline, before moving to Age of Calamity, Breath of the Wild, and its sequel at the very end of the timeline. In the Downfall timeline, the Hero of Time was killed in a decisive battle against Ganondorf. The Master Sword fell down to the ground, and the King of Evil extracted the Triforce of Wisdom by force from Princess Zelda and the Triforce of Courage from the corpse of the Hero of Time, with the complete Triforce transformed into Ganon. Knowing that the fate of the entire world was at stake, the sages, together with Princess Zelda, sealed the monstrosity in the Sacred Realm's Golden Land, and the Master Sword was laid to rest. There, it slept through the many greedy souls who ended up in Ganon's Dark World, and would turn to monsters who would take part in the failed invasion which we know as the Imprisoning War. The Blade of Evil's Bane, however, would wait for a chosen knight who would make his way through the big maze of fake swords in the Lost Woods and reach the pedestal with the 3 pendants of virtue. This requirement was not fulfilled until the young hero of legend arrived to pull the Master Sword and challenge Ganon's alter ego, Aghanim.
With the Master Sword in his left hand, Link defeated Aghanim twice, and then Ganon in combination with the Silver Arrow, but not before upgrading the legendary blade. First to the Tempered Sword by the Dwarven Swordsmiths, after bringing back the missing smith from the Dark World to Kakariko Village. The Tempered Sword doubled the Master Sword's power, but to defeat Ganon, Link would eventually drop the Tempered Sword into the mysterious pond and allow the Cursed Fairy to turn the blade into the ultimate Golden Sword. The sword that could kill nearly every enemy in one blow and allow to pierce Ganon with a silver arrow in record time. This blade doubled the power of the original Master Sword once again and turned the hero of legend into nearly a god, especially when combining the Golden Sword Skyward with the Bombos and Ether medallions. For more on the destructive powers of the Master Sword in A Link to the Past, please go and check out Zeltic's video on the matter, as we still have a few more games to go over. Even so, after the Master Sword was returned to sleep again forever, it was pulled a few generations later while the hero of legend most likely was still alive by another hero of Hyrule who went on the same path. Claimed the 3 pendants of virtue, pulled the Master Sword in the Lost Woods, challenged Yuga, and then ended up in the parallel world of Lorule.
There, he found 2 pieces of Master Ore and his mentor's missing son. In gratitude, the blacksmith tempered Link's Master Sword into the level 2 Master Sword, which added a red glow to the blade and made it twice as strong as the regular Master Sword. Sadly, the Hylian blacksmith admitted that he wasn't capable of forging the Master Sword any further, so Link had to search for the right blacksmith elsewhere, and he found it in Lorule. And with 2 more Master Ores, the Golden Blade of the Hero of Legend, or as it was now known, the Master Sword level 3 was restored. The strongest blade of Hyrule, which was double as strong as the level 2 Master Sword. Truly the blade of evil's bane for Yuga Ganon, who was defeated by its golden glow before it was laid to rest as the regular Master Sword in its pedestal in the Lost Woods. There it seemingly slept forever, as no other hero in the Downfall timeline pulled it after a link between worlds. The Master Sword remained in its forest pedestal in the 2 timelines where the Hero of Time had fallen and lived on, well until he became the Hero's Shade, and kept Ganondorf in stone in the timeline branch which he was sent out of. Nonetheless, the story of the Master Sword was far from over, since tens of thousands of years after the Master Sword was last wielded by a hero we know of, the blade was once again pulled to defeat Ganondorf, before being returned again after he was sealed for what seemed to be for good this time in the distant past of Breath of the Wild's timeline. Then again, this could also have been Ganondorf from Twilight Princess, but this still remains to be confirmed.
Anyhow, we believe this is the right moment to address the curious case of the Master Sword in this part of the Zelda timeline. Namely, that it might have been pulled up to 4 times between the end of the 3 timeline branches and the end of the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, by the hero who led to the sealing of Ganondorf. Then, after being returned, by the hero who with the princess played center stage in the victorious ancient battle against Calamity Ganon 10,000 years prior to the Great Calamity. Then by Link before the Great Calamity, and by Link 100 years after the Great Calamity. If all of this is true, then it would mean that the Master Sword has been pulled as many times in the Breath of the Wild space of the timeline as in the Adult, Child, and Downfall timelines combined. Now then, since we already have covered the adventures of the Master Sword with the hero who brought the sealing of Ganondorf in the distant past, and the hero who together with Princess Zelda sealed away Calamity Ganon within Hyrule Castle in the battle around 10,000 years prior to the future hero of the Wild's turn to pull the Master Sword, let's just jump to the Great Deku Tree in Korok Forest welcoming the young Link. Though here, we face a dilemma as according to creating a champion, Link, the son of a knight of the Kingdom of Hyrule, pulled the legendary blade in front of the Great Deku Tree in Korok Forest at the age of 12. It is just that this source is uncertain now that Age of Calamity is teasing that Link might have pulled it in the presence of the champions and Princess Zelda, and doing so closer to the age of 17. Even so, upon pulling the legendary blade, Link became the Hylian champion and was tasked to wield the blade for 2 purposes: protect Princess Zelda as her chosen knight and destroy Calamity Ganon with it. The princess was displeased with Link, and despite blessing the sword and its role to the spirit of the hero of Hyrule since the beginning, she deliberately stated her doubt of Link's ability, but radically changed her mind after her chosen hero and the Blade of Evil's Bane saved her life from a group of Yiga foot soldiers.
From that moment, she grew fond of the Hylian champion as the rightful wielder of the Master Sword chosen by the Spirit Fi herself. Due to Zelda's failure to unlock her hidden power, even at Hyrule Castle in the presence of Impa and Link, when the time to face Calamity Ganon arrived, there was nothing left but run from the corrupted Guardian Stalkers. Link led the charge, but with Zelda's understandable breakdown and the Guardians catching up, Link was forced to battle Guardian Stalker after Guardian Stalker to slice a path to safety. These skirmishes greatly wounded Link and damaged the Master Sword to a state unseen throughout tens of thousands of years of history. Chosen Knight and the Princess of the crumbling Kingdom of Hyrule were cornered, but Link stood his ground until Zelda intervened and finally unleashed her power to him out of love. The hero fell unconscious, but was thanks to Fi's sign saved as the princess instructed the Sheikah to bring him to the Shrine of Resurrection. Meanwhile, Zelda would bring the damaged Master Sword with her to Kakariko Village and from there to Korok Forest, where she returned the damaged Master Sword after asking the Great Deku Tree to protect it, until its master would reclaim it.
Over the next century, Link and the Master Sword healed, while Zelda challenged and held Calamity Ganon until 100 years later, when Link was resurrected. He was set on a path by the ancient and modern Sheikah to reclaim his lost memories, the champion tunic, and enough health by completing the shrine trials prepared for the hero candidate. With more than 13 hearts, Link could make his way back to Korok Forest, the Great Deku Tree, and there pull the Master Sword. For the first time in its long and cherished history, the blade of Evil's Bane was pulled more than once by the same Link. Over the last century, the regular Master Sword had regained its abilities. Even so, its holy power was only activated when in the presence of evil, more precisely malice or corrupted by malice mechanical machines. It also had the disadvantage of temporarily running out of power when used against enemies in areas without malice. This weakness to the Master Sword in the face of the tremendous evil across the land and at Hyrule's castle's sanctum made Link determined to bring the sword to its fullest potential by clearing the stages of the Trial of the Sword. With it, the blade was at any time filled with its holy power to repel evil, became more durable and ready to face and defeat Calamity Ganon. With the light arrows and Zelda's power, Dark Beast Ganon was then sealed or destroyed, and Link was reunited with the princess after 100 years. She, in gratitude for his great courage, dubbed him the Hero of Hyrule, or more specifically, the Hero of the Wild. Calamity Ganon and Dark Beast Ganon were gone, but the Master Sword was not returned back to its pedestal as the hunt for the true culprit was initiated. This was another first, as the Master Sword had always been returned after the Princess of Hyrule had been liberated, and in most cases, the complete Triforce reclaimed. Perhaps Fi, who Zelda claimed to no longer hear, responded, or Impa, or even Monk Maz Koshia, informed of the true threat to Hyrule, the Sealed Ganondorf. Naturally, after Zelda's and Link's awakening, it was Ganondorf's turn to awaken from his seal and force the Master Sword on an unknown path to challenge the destiny that was Ganondorf, and within him demise his hatred and eternal curse. The hatred of the Demon King, the blood of the goddess, and the spirit of the hero. Once again united for another confrontation over the Triforce in the eternal battle of power against wisdom and courage and the Master Sword.
That concludes the Master Sword timeline, stretching down from the Goddess Sword, which was forged into the true Master Sword, across Skyward Sword, and then Demise's everlasting curse through Ganondorf and Ganon in Ocarina of Time, The Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, A Link to the Past, Link Between Worlds, Age of Calamity, Breath of the Wild, and now its sequel. If you enjoyed this big production, then be sure to leave a like, as we are aiming for at least 3,500 on this video for the 35 years of the Zelda franchise in 2021. And if you haven't already, then subscribe, press the notification bell, and again for all notifications to not miss any of our upcoming Zelda theories, timeline videos, and Breath of the Wild 2 videos. Finally, a big thanks to all our patrons, our royal producer Charles Shash, but this time in particular Dave and Heroic Replicas for making this video possible. Link to his auctions and Blade of Evil's Bane replica orders is in the description down below. Now, at the end of the Master Sword timeline, please enjoy one or both of these two awesome videos.